Welcome to the Dana Brigman Canine Nutrition and Wellness Podcast. Dana is a dog mama, natural wellness educator, certified canine nutritionist, and learning junkie. Her greatest joy is sharing her knowledge and expertise so your dog can live their happiest and healthiest life. For more information on how Dana can help your best friend, check out her website, naturalwellnessfordogs.com. Now, without further ado, here is your host, Dana Brigman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Brigman from the Well-Oiled Canine and Canine Coach, and this is my friend Natalie. Natalie and I met a number of years ago when I was doing a little bit of hobby work for photography.
Yeah.
And she brought me one of her beautiful boxers to photograph. And I still have those photos, by the way. And I know you do too. I think you hung one of them on your wall.
Yes. It's on my wall right when you walk into the house.
That's
I
awesome.
love it.
That
It's one of
makes
my
me
favorite
happy.
photos.
Natalie is a dog mama like the rest of us, right? And so she's been on a journey she's fostered for over 17 years and now has what she calls her tribe of Frenchies. And I love that. But they are hers. She has adopted them. Some of them are from retired breeding programs and a variety of ways that she came to have them. So today we're talking about Roman, who is now 10 years old, but you've had him for about 3 years now, right?
Yes, I brought him home in March of 2019. He was almost 6.5 years old. He was retired to me from a breeder in my area that I know because we used to use the same vet. So definitely one of the better breeders, right? Not like somebody who has them, on chains in the backyard or in barns or whatever. They're in the house, but they have kind of like a kennel environment in a finished basement, all heated and all of that. So definitely one of the better breeders that you can find that he came from. And they retired him to me because they wanted him to have a better home. And I think he was starting to have some tummy issues. And so, for me, working with that and having that kind of is and has been my specialty in fosters. Seems like all along the years, the things that I've dealt with have been more of like behavioral issues. I've had some aggressive dogs and then dogs with tummy troubles. And so, and allergies, of course. And that has what led me to be a raw feeder. I've been a raw feeder for like 10 years now. And so it was the frustration of what my vet was offering me not working and then saying, okay, what can I go and find something else to do? But Roman is a very sweet boy and I'm very happy that he's in my pack. But he like many other dogs, I think that when you find yourself in a situation where your dog has all these gut issues, it becomes a challenge to know how to navigate it. And so I wanted to share his story in case somebody else is dealing with this, not from a veterinarian's point of view, but from a pet mom's point of view, to say, hey, here's some other options if you don't like what your vet is offering you.
So the disease, is it a disease or is it what is it? And I had to look up how to pronounce it and I'll probably still make a mess of it, but it's
Lymphangiectasia.
Yeah, easy for you to say. So say it one more time without me interrupting.
Lymphangiectasia is what it is. And so it is basically where the flow of lymphatic fluid through the body is blocked or constricted from inflammation. And so nutrients and waste and things can move through the body through the blood but then also the lymphatic system pushes that through the body too. And so the blood is forced through the system by the heart, and the lymphatic system, that is just forced through the body through normal constriction of your muscles and all of that. And so Roman, at kind of, 8 months into me having him, was diagnosed with IBD, PLE, protein losing enteropathy, and lymphangiectasia. And so I never heard of it before.
Right. That had to be pretty scary though, right? To hear all of that.
Well, whenever I first got him, and so I picked him up on a Sunday, and then the very next day he went in and had his neuter done and Bose surgery done. And Bose surgery for bulldogs is like having an elongated palate trimmed, because they grow, and it's very common in bulldogs, whether English or French bulldogs, to have them. It's a very common surgery to have. And vets, they can grow so long and kind of block the back of the throat and really make it a struggle to breathe. So oftentimes when you hear these bulldogs with these like kind of wispy honking kind of sounds that people associate as normal bulldog sounds, are really a sign that you have this palate issue and that there needs to be a surgical correction. And yes, it's true, it is a normal bulldog thing to have, and even the best bred bulldogs have those because of the conformation that everyone likes to see now, like those smushed faces. But people also who acquire these dogs, whether it be through a breeder or a shelter or whatever, need to understand that that's something that they need to have checked to know whether or not that they need to have it trimmed. And so if it's progressed enough and someone who knows about bulldogs can hear it and be like, okay, I know. But sometimes when there still needs to be a surgical correction, you may not be able to confirm it until they're actually under for anesthesia. And that typically is something that even bulldog vets, like, you have to ask them, look for that. Can you look to check the palate? So if you're going to have a dental done and you're concerned about it, or spay neuter, that's a perfect time to do it. Like bulldog rescues, that is their normal protocol with their vets that they use when they send them in for spay and neuter. The vets always just check that, the palate, the nares. So do the nares need to be done? And bulldog rescues just have it done all at the same time. And that was what I asked my vet to do as well. If it needed to be done, knock it all out at once. They'll have a week or two of feeling crappy, and then all of a sudden they have this amazing new life of now they can breathe. And so he had his palate done and he had his nares done. And then he also had something done where they his laryngeal saccules had everted due to him struggling to breathe. And so that's a less common kind of thing. It kind of is an indication that maybe he had an elongated palate for a longer time and just that stress. So my vet removed those as well. And so that was just the day after. But for me, I kind of thought the timing was perfect in that, because when you bring a new dog in your pack, you can't just walk them in and be like, hey, everybody get along.
Right.
There's a transition period, and the perfect thing to happen during that transition period is for them to recover from surgery at the same time. So you're kind of knocking two birds out with one stone. That's my view on it. Everybody may not agree.
Oh,
so he had that done. And, that evening when I brought him home that Sunday, his poop was a little soft, but it wasn't like just diarrhea. It wasn't. But I did notice whenever I picked him up that he had like a little maybe dry poop on the back of his leg, not anything dramatic or anything. So I kind of thought, okay, yeah, he's definitely had some tummy troubles, but that didn't bother me at all. No hesitation, we'll take that on. I really thought I'm just going to put him on a raw diet and add some probiotics and things in, and that's going to straighten him out. That's what I thought it was. It was a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
So after that surgery, I noticed, and that was on March 11th. And then he had to go back. I think he was having some kind of respiratory something. I made some notes here on my screen. But then he went back that March and he got put on Clavamox. And I'm not quite certain why he was put on that. But then his tummy troubles really were not getting better. So in April, he started his first round of metronidazole. Metronidazole, that is the go-to for vets when dogs have tummy troubles. And let me just say right now, just say no to metronidazole. That is all, because it's far more problems than it helps. It's overprescribed, in my opinion. And I could talk about numerous dogs where that has become a problem in doing that. And now going forward, I know that there are better options if metronidazole is suggested. So then that didn't work. That didn't get better. Then the next month in May, we went back to the vet and then we started Tylenol powder. Let's see if Tylenol powder helps. Let's give that a round. So then he went back on that. And so then that didn't help. And a couple weeks later, we decided to do a Giardia test because we're thinking, okay, maybe he's got Giardia. I've had Giardia dogs in the past, can really tear up the gut. So I sent you that picture before this meeting, and that was
Girl, I needed a warning for that.
that was of the liquid poop. And at that point, after having the metronidazole and the Tylenol powder, it only made things worse. It didn't make things better. It had just progressed to where he was just having this chronic diarrhea. And so that morning, I had a stack of styrofoam bowls that I had used. I bought like for some kind of cookout or something. And I had to kind of hold the bowl out. And when he pooped, I collected it. It kind of just went in the bowl. And so I had this liquid and I covered it up in saran wrap. And that's what I took to my vet. And I was like, here's your fecal sample. But we did the Giardia antigen test. And so that was negative. So we knew he didn't have Giardia. So it was like, okay. So then after that, we started again another round of Metro, and he was on that for like 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Metro. And then we were back again on 531. Back on 531, and he had an ear infection at that point. Go figure. His gut's all messed up. All of that, of course, ear infection comes into play with all of that. So then he got Claro for an ear infection, and we did some more blood work. And then at that point, we did a mild digestion panel. And that came back, and he didn't have EPI or anything like that. His blood work, his albumin levels were super low. But he did need to start B12. His B12 was to the point that we needed to supplement. So then we started on B12 injections. That was on June the 4th. And then that on the 4th, we also had an abdominal ultrasound, because at this point I realized that everything that normally had worked for me, getting off that, a high inflammatory kibble diet, even the best kibble is, terrible, really. And my philosophy at this point is that no matter what you're treating, the first step is to get your dog off of kibble. The first step, no matter what it is. And whether it be a raw diet like I feed, or a home cook, a lightly cooked diet, or a dehydrated raw. And I know not every dog does the best on raw, and there are some dogs that do better on home cooked or lightly cooked or a dehydrated raw, but get them off that kibble. That is the first thing. So I knew that all these things weren't working, all these great supplements that I was using. And I was like, okay, it's time for an ultrasound, because at this point I'm thinking, oh my God, does this dog have cancer? I mean, because I was throwing everything that I had that had worked at other dogs, and it wasn't working.
How was he feeling during this time? I mean,
so here's the other thing, I don't think that people always trace grumpiness to GI issues, but they most certainly can cause GI issues. The dog that I have now is very different than the dog that I got. No, he wasn't dog aggressive. He was great with the other female Frenchies. Of course, he was a retired stud dog. But my boxer, who is the most submissive dog ever, Abner, he was just terrible to him. And he would snap and jump and go after Abner. And Abner was the best boy ever. He would just turn and run away from him. Sometimes because he wouldn't climb the stairs, and still to this day doesn't climb the stairs to go upstairs. Abner learned that and would just go run upstairs when he would go after. And I really knew it was because he wasn't feeling well. Right. And, so I tried to limit their interaction as much as possible. And he was never aggressive to me. He was a sweet dog, but you knew that he didn't feel well. He had this kind of bloated like belly. It was a little, and you just knew something wasn't right. And he was waking me up every night. So I was not getting sleep. I was sleep deprived. Sometimes it was 2-3 times a night. Precious soul would give me a warning every time. He would let me know that something was going on and I needed to get him out. And I realized that whenever he would start his Frenchie howl, that I had about a minute and a half to get out of bed and get downstairs and get him out the door before he had a blowout. And I just am so appreciative to him that he knew, to wake her up and get him out. I mean, it was really terrible, and it's rough, when you're not getting sleep at night and you love this dog, and, you're in tears and you're crying, I would have these conversations with my mom in tears, like, I don't know, nothing I've done before worked. And, it's really bewildering.
Right.
And you keep you keep trying these things and doing these things, and then you realize, okay, you really got to start doing some serious testing to figure out what's going on. So then we did the abdominal ultrasound, and this is the summary. It said moderate gallbladder sludge, and we started them, I think it was that drug with a uridisol. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Well, he got put on that. Moderate to severe generalized thickening of the stomach wall. Rule out chronic gastritis, immune mediated versus neoplasia versus infectious versus other. Based on finding, full thickness biopsies of GI tract should be considered. I was like, okay, so that tells you a lot about nothing.
Yeah.
And I was really concerned about having that surgical biopsy done because he's so sick. And, you know, he's almost 7, and I'm worried he's not going to survive the surgery at all. So then in July, we repeated his blood work to IDEX. We're doing that full panel that includes the thyroid and all of that. So this will be his 4th round of that. And then we repeat those maldigestion tests to see, we're checking the B12 to see how he's responding, and he's responding to that. I'm still trying some other things with diet. Then we did a repeat again in August of that blood work. And then we were able to take him off at that point from daily B12 injections. And then that was when he went to weekly. And then also in August, we did that ACTH stimulation test. Well, we did, my vet did, to find out if maybe he had Cushing's or Addison's, and that was all normal. So then we started Tylenol powder again. And then, you know, at that point, he is just a disaster. I mean, it's just diarrhea all the time. He's just so pitiful. And I finally relented and said, okay, we're going to do the surgical biopsy. You know, I didn't take it lightly because in order to do it right, you've got to take, you know, full section biopsies from the inside to the outside. So, you know, and you got to do it in 3 sections of your gut. So you're doing your intestine, your small intestine, your large intestine. And, you know, you hope that all that heals back okay, and that, you know, he's okay in the anesthesia because his blood work is crap. I mean, just everything in his blood work is bad. And you just hope, but he made it through the surgery. So that's good. I will say this about my general practice vet. He is a great surgeon. And so while he's not a raw food feeder and doesn't necessarily support that, I would let him operate on me. If I ever need a hysterectomy, I might call him first before my regular doctor. So the spades and neuters, I bet he'd knock me out. No problem. He'd be like, oh yeah, I could do that in my sleep. So when the pathology report came back, that's when we saw his diagnosis of IBD, protein losing enteropathy, which we kind of already knew he had PLE just from his blood work. I mean, it was just so low anyway. And then lymphangiectasia. And that was literally the first time I'd ever heard that word. And, you know, 17 years of fostering, I never heard it personally, never come up in all the things that I dealt with. So it's like, all right, you know, Googling, trying to figure out what it is. And of course, from my vet standpoint, the treatment that generally a GP vet's going to do are going to be those prescription kibble diets and steroids. And, you know, he knows me very well and knows I'm never going to do that. And so, you know, at that point, I'm kind of panicking and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? So then I'm spending some time looking. And whenever I first started feeding raw, I started with Darwin's. Darwin's is a ship to your door raw, and they actually have a couple of prescription, in that you really do need a prescription from your vet, formulas of raw food. And one of them is a cancer diet. And I thought, I was looking at the ingredients, and I have the screen up. It has whitefish, turkey neck, turkey gizzards, turkey meat, beef liver, maitake and shiitake mushrooms, great for cancer. And this is a cancer diet: whole dried eggs, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, cod liver oil, spirulina, fish oil, turmeric, green tea, and black pepper. So then I asked my GP vet if he would write the prescription for that, and he was not comfortable doing that. He reached out to a veterinary nutritionist friend that he had and just shot him or her, I don't even remember the sex of the person, an email and ask about this diet. And they basically, the summary, I mean, I have everything printed out. There's no point in reading. The summary is that, you know, it wasn't balanced and she wouldn't recommend that. And, you know, she was like, you know, if you are not going to do a prescription kibble diet, then, you know, you need to have something formulated by one of those vets. And, you know, they're, you know, oftentimes they are, and it needs to be low fat and all of this. And oftentimes, you know, they have rice and things like that. And I didn't want to go that route. So my vet was like, you don't want to do this stuff, then you need to find a holistic vet. And that was the best advice he gave me, because that's what I did. And that kind of took us to the path of healing. Because to me, whenever your dog is having these stomach issues, no matter what the cause is, I want to try to heal. That's what I don't want to suppress a system. Just like with allergies, I'm not a fan of Apoquel or those Cytopoint injections or all that kind of stuff, because you're suppressing a reaction to a disease process, and you're not addressing the root cause of it. And that you're not really getting anywhere with it. And then when you start tinkering with the immune system, what about when you actually need it? Like if you take them out somewhere in public and they get exposed to something that maybe they're not vaccinated for, or maybe there's not even a vaccine for, or whatever, or, you know, there's some kind of cancer process that comes up. And if you don't have a proper functioning immune system, you know, I mean, you're just causing more problems. And so I wanted to find out how to heal. And so how I found a holistic vet was I actually reached out to Darwin's and said, hey, because I use their food for foster dogs, and Darwin's is a really great company. If you're fostering a dog for a 501c3 organization, they will give you discounted food for that foster dog. And Darwin's has been really great to me over the years with some fosters that I've had, and I've put on their food. So I still to this day like them, although they're not currently in my current rotation. I do periodically sometimes just order some of their food because I know that they're so reputable. They do have limited protein sources, so that kind of makes it hard if you have dogs with sensitivities and whatever. But I reached out to them and said, okay, who are the vets in my area that are prescribing your food? And I started from there, and they were really nice, and they sent me a list, and I then kind of picked a couple that I thought might be possibilities based on their geographic location. And I found a great holistic vet in Charlotte Natural Animal Clinic, Dr. Schott. I usually typically just say Dr. S because I'm always afraid I'm pronouncing his name wrong. So I'll just be like, Dr. S. I found him, and he had his first homeopathic consult in September. So I brought him home in March, and he had his first consult in September. He was diagnosed in August and consult in September. So I met with him, and that was my first time ever having one of those consults. And it was almost like he was like writing a book, I mean, he really sat down. I think we were in there for like an hour and a half, and he's asking me all these questions, like everything I knew about his background and how he acts at home, and foods he likes when he gets sick and all of this. And he's just really sitting down studying him and looking at him and watching him in the room and taking notes and all of this. And then he goes out of the room. It's like, okay, I'll be back later. And then, later on he comes back in, and then he has his recommendation for whatever he wanted to start on. And I remember at first, I think it was heifer sulf. And forgive me if I'm not pronouncing any of the stuff right. Like, I'm not pretending to be an expert in this. This is my point of view from a pet mom.
Got it.
And then lycopodium. And so that's what, and so with these tinctures, they come in a little glass bottle, and you have to keep them away from microwave waves because that can inactivate the medicine. I jokingly call this stuff, and I probably shouldn't because I don't want other people to hear it and think that I don't think this stuff works right, but I joke and call it his hokey pokey meds.
You witch type this stuff. I know.
So it's in this bottle, and so you have to, this is how you have to make it fresh daily. And so I actually keep it in the refrigerator now, and I have to take the bottle and hit it up against my hand 10 times, and you'll see it kind of fuzz up, and then drop 10 drops into a glass of a half a cup of distilled water, stir it up, and then pull it up in a syringe give it to him, and then dump it in the sink. And then that's it. And you think, okay, this seems kind of, in the beginning of it, you're kind of thinking, all right, am I getting played here? Is this stuff going to help? But he also recommended like some other like different kind of probiotics and supplements. And then, we started on the script diet too. And then I did start to see like things improve a little bit. It was nothing like overnight, because the reality is deep healing takes time and nothing happens overnight.
Right.
And he did take the time to explain that to me, so I knew that things were going to take time. And it was during that process too that I learned about Adored Beast Apothecary. And Adored Beast Apothecary was founded by Julie Ann Lee. And this is what I know about Julie Ann Lee. She, I guess, like grew up with like very holistic parents and a grandmother. And I think she said at some point, like she wasn't vaccinated as a child and all that kind of stuff. And her grandmother would make kind of like this soup of like meat and vegetables and all of this to like feed their animals with. So they didn't do kibble and all that kind of stuff. And then, she was trying to decide whether or not she wanted to go to veterinary school when she got older, or, if she wanted to continue to compete doing something with horses. She's a big horse person. She has lots of horses. So she decided to become a vet tech. And she was actually a vet tech for 6 years. And then she said what kind of changed her outlook was she was doing all these things while she was a vet tech that, vets do, the kibble, all the over vaccinations, all those things. And then her 4-year-old dog got cancer. And then that was when her family called her to a side and said, hey, you're doing everything wrong, because she had started taking on this whole path that her family didn't do. And they had animals, large breed dogs that lived to be like 16, 20 years old or whatever. And so at that point, that was when she kind of started getting into the homeopathy. And she actually went to school somewhere here, Vancouver, I think, a 4-year program in human homeopathy. And then after that, went somewhere in the UK for some surgical homeopathy school that she went there. And so then she opened up like her own kind of vet clinic practice. Even though she wasn't a veterinarian per se, she was a homeopath for the veterinary field. So there was a clinic, and I guess, she talks about, I've watched so many videos of her talking about her journey and all the things that she did. But in her clinic, she said that, her big thing was not just how an individual item worked, but the synergy of putting multiple things together.
Right.
So she started putting together these protocols just for her clients that she was seeing in the clinic. And then one of her vet techs was like, hey, maybe we should start making this stuff in bulk. Like, instead of mixing it up individually, maybe we should start. And it was through that process that she came up with the products now that you can purchase from Adored Beast. And it's really like bringing these specialized treatments to the masses, although a lot of people still don't know about it. But, and so she has something called a leaky gut protocol. And it's a kit, and there's multiple things in it. And, she has videos that you can watch. You can go on their website. She does lives on her Facebook page, and you can hear her talk about the what and the why of each thing and why she put all these ingredients together. But basically, it sounded like this great way to try to cure leaky gut. And so the thought process behind Roman and what happened to him is that with the breeder, he was fed Royal Canin Bulldog. And that's what he ate his whole time that he was there. So I'm sure he had some kind of puppy food when he was a puppy, but his adult food was the Royal Canin Bulldog. And they gave milk bone dog biscuits as treats. And it's a really low quality diet, and as well-meaning as they are. And a lot of people, there's so many people out there feeding this food, and they think, thanks to the marketing, that it's this great food. These pet food companies, these commercials, man, just bring tears to my eyes sometimes. It's just and you think, how can you make this heart-touching commercial and then, this crappy food? But the reality is that, their ingredients are so cheap that they have all this money for, you know, all these advertising and marketing campaigns, whereas the high quality foods you're never going to see a commercial for on TV because they're spending all their money, you know, on high quality ingredients, and they're relying on people, you know, like Dr. Judy Morgan or you or whoever, or holistic veterinarians or privately owned pet food stores, you know, to educate people on these things because they are putting the money in the ingredients. But anyway, so so that's what he was fed. And so I can tell you this now as a healthy dog, he cannot eat chicken. And so the meat in that, which is chicken meal, call meat.
Not even meat. Yeah, let's call it what it is. Not even meat.
But that's all he had his whole life. And so he didn't have a diverse diet. And there's so many people out there doing this. Like, you know, this doesn't, and I'm having this conversation and I'm not bashing the breeder, and nor am I anyone listening to this who may be doing the same thing, but want to bring awareness that that's not what you should be doing. And this is what can happen when you do it, because he developed an allergy to that chicken, and then he was still fed that chicken and all that stuff else that was in that food that was so terrible. And then that is what generated his IBD. And then that progressed into the PLE and the lymphangiectasia. So here's the thing, is that IBD and lymphangiectasia can cause PLE. So which one caused it? Who knows? And there's no way to know for certain. But the point is that he had all three, and it was a progression that, you know, could have been avoided at any point in time. And it's also a wake-up call, I think, and it should be to anyone listening to this. If you have a dog who may have food sensitivities, if you don't figure out what they are and address it and change the diet, that it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. It can go from just paw licking to whatever, to what happened to Roman, and it turning into this, you know, IBD and lymphangiectasia. So it's just like this progression of this poor diet. And in addition, you know, because, you know, they had multiple dogs and it was, you know, a very small breeding kennel in their house, you know, they were doing a lot of vaccinations. So they did a lot of vaccinations I would never do. And so like Roman now, you know, he was vaccinated for so many things. The only thing he's getting from me is rabies, and that is because it's required by law. And we do that with his holistic vet. And then afterwards, he's getting a no-sode from the holistic vet to help negate those negative fallout from those vaccinations.
Yeah. But, can you say that again? I tell everybody what, you know, I get the law, and when we get that rabies shot, there are things we need to do. I call it the detox protocol, but not everybody thinks that that's a real thing, that there's a real need for that. So thank you for bringing into that.
Yeah, and I think I kind of figured that out with a couple of dogs that I've had before that had allergy issues, and then you would notice that things would get worse and they would have a flare up after a vaccination. And so I think on my own, I kind of started putting 2 and 2 together, that like, hey, you know, this is kind of causing some negative things. And then, you know, and I'm most certainly never going to be anti-vaccination. I mean, I think that vaccines are great if given correctly and you know, at the right time. You know, puppy vaccines, you know, aren't always given with the right timing. Oftentimes I think that they're given too early when they still have immunity from the mother and kind of all that kind of stuff. But then I don't think people, you know, there's a lot of misconception about how long, you know, a vaccine can last, the effects of that. So I'm not anti-vaccination for sure. I mean, I have my COVID vaccine, all of that. I'm not one of those bashing that. I love science and I love that we can come up with these vaccines. But at the same time, just like with any kind of prescription medicine for us or for our dogs, there tends to always be this negative side effect to it. And you just always have to kind of weigh all of that and be prepared for what those negative side effects are. And sometimes those negative side effects are way worse than what you're treating. And, you know, you just want to avoid it, but sometimes it's not, and you want to be prepared to deal with that. And so holistic veterinarians, if you use them to give the vaccine, they can give something called no-sodes to help eliminate that. And it's real quick. It's something he kind of pops up his nose and it's real fast, so the dog doesn't even know it happened. And And so that's, how Roman will get his vaccines now. And I have another IBD dog as well. Abner, my boxer, and the same thing, doing that with the vet. Now, the other guys, when they get their rabies, they are getting it with my regular vet, but I am doing something, giving them something afterwards. And there are lots of different ways to do that. And I know that you talk about that, and there's different products and things, but definitely something needs to be given, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I either do it with essential oils, homeopathy, or both. Now, you can't give homeopathy and essential oils simultaneously. They have to be administered at least 30 minutes to an hour apart, but they can be done in the same protocol. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So we started with these leaky gut kits, and I started watching all these videos from Adored Beast, and I actually was reaching out to them, and that was at a time before they had all of this presence on Facebook, whenever I started that. And so I was actually, and that was when you could message them on their Facebook page, and I was messaging and talking to them and getting feedback, and they were really helpful at that point. And so what I learned was that how many of those kits you go through is based on the level of disease. And so they had said that depending on, if you had like a severe disease, you might need is up to as many as 6. And I was like, well, I think Roman, counts for that. And they actually gave me like a couple of discount codes for those first few kits that I bought. And I just went ahead and bought like 3 or 4 of them, and we just did them back to back. And it seemed, and when I started those kits, and that coupled with that homeopathic tincture that I was giving from my holistic vet, I mean, it was just like watching the sunrise in the morning, but in slow motion. You could see like this light come back in his eyes, and it's wonderful.
That is amazing.
Makes me tear up.
I know that's.
But now, we actually did 6 of those kits, and now this dog, he is 10 years old. He just turned 10 in October. And he can run and play with the other dogs. It only lasts about 10, 15 minutes. And that's about all I can take. But he runs and plays. And sometimes he'll go running in the backyard, and all 4 of his legs will be off the ground at the same time. And it is beautiful to see. He has this perfect little round poop. It's just little balls. And I just love it. And he is just so happy and healthy. Now, he's on his raw diet. He'll have to stay on that for the rest of his life. He will have to continue getting those B12 injections for the rest of his life. He gets them once a week. It's no big deal. And he will stay on his daily remedy from his holistic vet for the rest of his life. And so that's just a part of our habit now. He knows it. And after I like stir it up and pull it out with a syringe, I'll be like, come on, Roman, don't you want your squirt? And he comes and runs up for it, and I'll squirt it in his mouth. And, it's just a part of the routine now. And so, but I do know that is effective, and I do know that it works, because it was last year, I think, I ran out of his meds, and it was like 2 weeks before his appointment. And so what I can do is I can just reach out to them and say, hey, can you just ship some to me? But then you have to pay shipping and all of that and have it shipped. And I thought, oh, it's just a couple of weeks. I'll just ride it out until his next appointment, and then get more of his med. I think he started off on lycopodium. I think now he's on arsenicum. And he was on 2 different kinds. One of them, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Sure.
One of them, there was a different ending, and now he's on, I think, a stronger version of it now.
Gotcha.
But I noticed in that couple of weeks of him not being on it, his poop starting to get bigger. Not anything drastic. He didn't, start getting sick, not diarrhea, but I noticed it from it going to the balls to it getting a little longer, kind of like headed towards like what kibble poop looks like. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, we won't do that anymore. And so then I told him that at that visit, and he's like, yeah, you got to keep him on it, daily for the rest of his life. And that manages. So I think like the correct way to describe it is like through this process, we have him in remission. And so as long as we keep doing these things, then he's healthy and happy. And, there's no negative side effects, and he's getting a good nutritious diet. And I mean, if you looked at him, you just wouldn't know that he's 10 years old. Now, nobody's going to look at him and think he's 2, But, most people think he's like 5 or 6 years old. He
Mhm.
is in such great shape, and his coat looks so good. And he's just so cuddly and love bugs. And him and my male boxer, Abner, are just buddies. They groom each other. They're just best friends. And he's just the sweetest dog ever. And it truly confirms to me that that kind of grumpiness he had in the beginning was all because he wasn't feeling well. And I think it's important for people to realize that, I'm not saying that every dog aggressive or grumpy dog or any dog that you're having behavioral issues, that it's all this, but this can definitely be a part of it, if not all of it.
I agree. And that's one of the things that I keep trying to say to my behavior cases, right? We're going to talk food. We're going to talk possible vaccinosis. We're going to talk all these things, and their eyes kind of glaze over and think, but my dog's just reacting to the mailman, and I'm like, yeah, but, and it's a very hard conversation to have until they see it work, till they see those changes. And those changes, like you're describing, they're not always fast. I have a mentor that says healing happens from the inside out and in reverse order of the symptoms that showed up.
Right.
So he came to you with sort of this underlying condition that progressed, and he's probably never going to, you've said that he's never going to be cured.
Right. And I think all across the veterinary spectrum, whether it's a GP or a holistic vet, they just say there's no cure for it.
Right.
There's a way to manage it.
Exactly.
But it's how you manage it.
Exactly. And so food, supplementation, these protocols that we talk about, and in my world, the behavior, the way in which we lead, right? The environment in which we set up structure and leadership and all that comes with that, it all comes together to help us manage and keep those dogs happy and balanced. So,
oh, for sure. Because I think, for Roman, like being like in a kennel environment too, you have to think about there's a stress that comes along with that too, because different dogs coming in and out or whatever, and maybe some of them might not enjoy him. If there's a couple of stud dogs in there, you might be having some reactions through the kennels or whatever. All of that, it just compiles on. And when you add that kind of stress from your environment, then stress from your diet, stress from vaccines, it just creates this horrible, like mega storm, that's just disastrous, really. It does.
If any of his siblings or offspring have similar health issues?
Well, I had his dad. So his dad was Roshi, and I got him when he was 9, and he made it to 12. He did not, but he wasn't from this breeder. He was from a different breeder, and then this breeder used him as a stud from that breeder. They were friends or whatever. So he kind of had a different environment, a different, kind of thing. He did not, he had issues with regurg whenever I got his dad. So, and I had that, what's that one where they put that stuff in your gut and x-ray and watch it follow through to prove that he didn't have mega esophagus. He didn't have anything blocking it. So I just got him on raw and some good supplements. It never completely stopped it, but it definitely managed it. Because I remember like when I first went and picked him up, he regurged and like food just kind of went all on the floor. But he needed palate surgery too, and he needed his nares done too. And so all of that can like put a stress, if you're dealing with that, like, the majority of your life, that can put a stress on the system as well. So I don't, there can be a genetic factor to lymphangiectasia, but it's important to remember that all of us, whether we're dogs or us, the original microbiome that we have in our gut comes from our mother, right? And so then what we experience in life either makes it better or takes it down, right? So I think that even those that are born with it, I think it's at some point an acquired, right? It's not a congenital because you're just passing that stuff down. Now, there is a different, I know that right-sided heart failure, congestive heart failure can also cause lymphangiectasia. So that's a little bit different. But you know, yeah, I don't think this is congenital. And because his son, I do know who has a son, and his son was retired at a young age. So they kind of took a different approach, the breeder, and that they kind of did a co-ownership with his son. They used him for like a year as a stud, and then they just retired him. But the whole time he lived with those people. So he lived in a home as a pet with kids and that kind of stuff. And then once they were done kind of using him as stud, then they had him neutered. So he didn't have all these issues. Now, Etta, who was just retired to me, is his granddaughter. She came to me with perfect poop, has perfect poop, no nothing, no digestive issues at all. So, so yeah.
I have one question. So we talked about IBD, PLE, and
Lymphangiectasia.
Lymphangiectasia. I'll probably never say it right because I had never heard of it until
Lymphangiectasia. Yeah.
Lymphangiectasia. All righty.
Yeah.
So those three, and then you moved into talking about leaky gut.
Yeah. Which
what? And I know that's related to the IBD. And is it related to the lymphangiectasia, or all of that just came together to cause all these stomach issues that led you down the path of treating leaky gut? Because a lot of people talk about leaky gut, but not the rest of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's different, from my understanding is that, you know, there's different levels of you know, leaky gut is a progression. So the stomach lining has these joints and they're supposed to be really tight. And then once food is digested properly by the gut, then these small microscopic pieces are supposed to flow through those joints into the bloodstream, and that's how you get your nutrition. But when you have this chronic inflammation, then those joints get stiff and they get non-pliable and they start to separate. And what happens is that then these not properly digested things start leaking through into the body. And then the body kind of sees that as kind of like what is this? And then it starts attacking it in this whole inflammatory process, right? And so it's kind of all related. I think that to me, it kind of seems like it's one and the same. So if you want to treat IBD, then you're treating leaky gut.
Right.
But I do know that you can start to have that leaky gut with because typically whenever you start seeing, I think it's all like a progression, because typically when you start seeing dogs being diagnosed with IBD, is you start seeing like diarrhea, loose stools, you know, kind of that back and forth, waxing and waning of all that stool, right? But leaky gut can start out and all that shows are paw licking or bad skin or all of this, because it's that inflammatory process, you know, that's causing all those issues, and the body's starting to attack all these things that are leaking through that aren't being processed correctly. So I think it, you know, to me, it seems like it's like a progression of things.
So what does not Abner, what does Roman eat today in terms of protein? What do you vary them, or you concerned about?
So he can eat anything but chicken. Okay. Because that's what he had before. So he eats turkey, he eats pork, he eats beef. Sometimes I'll feed him some of Abner's goat and that kind of stuff, but those are coming from different sources, and Abner, you know, has different issues, but he really does well. And so do all the other Frenchies on this Steve's Real Food. There's something about their formulation that these Frenchies just seem to do well on. And so while I do periodically kind of give them some of my other dogs' food, since I have 6 dogs now, I feed multiple brands of raw, their poop to me looks the best. And so some of my other Frenchies can have like a little bit of acid reflux and stuff. So I notice that like when I give them some of the BJ's raw, like roofie, when I give her some of the BJ's Raw or the Hair Today, that's like the 80-10-10 mix, you know, that she will start to have like some reflux, and you can hear like she'll sit on the couch and all of a sudden she'll get up and you'll kind of hear a little, do you know what I mean? And that's really lessened and very infrequent when I feed them Steves. So I just kind of keep them on that, because in my experience, it has been, you know, that there's no one perfect commercial raw food, that you just kind of have to play around and see what, you know, your dog does best on, because, you know, they can have food sensitivities to anything. So just because, like, you know, Abner can't eat Stella and Chewy's or Answers or whatever, doesn't mean that that's a bad raw food. It just means it's not the right one for him. And so I do think that that can, you know, be challenging for people whenever they start raw, and you know, they expect, I think their expectations are too high, and everybody wants it to happen so fast. We live in this world where everybody wants immediate gratification now. So you want to be able to start them on this diet, and then 2 days later, everything be okay. And I think whenever you don't see that, people think, oh, okay, raw food, that's a bunch of, and then, but you really kind of have to work with it and play with it. And I know that this was meant to be about Roman, but with Abner, one of the big game changers for me was, you know, I was feeding him raw, I was feeding him Answers, giving him like the best supplements, doing everything. And he just, and I knew he had IBD, he just was never thriving though. You know, I mean, he was never aggressive. He's the sweetest dog ever. He didn't have any behavioral issues, but he was just so thin and skinny. And he, you know, had, you know, lots of inflamed paws and stuff. So it was like constantly trying to manage that. And I just never could get it right. And then finally, I decided to take my own advice and do a NutriScan test on him. I had actually suggested it to tons of people before, but I never actually done it myself. And then so Dr. G. Dodds created that. And so the blood tests are really unreliable. And I know that because I've done it with dogs before, and then had something that they said, you know, the dog had sensitivity to. I know that when I feed it, that they're okay, or vice versa, something that the test says they're okay, that they're not okay with, and then I feed it and they are. So I kind of didn't have much faith in that. But her test is based on saliva. So you pay for it, you get a kit, you kind of swab it in their mouth and send it back. And then they send you back this list, this comprehensive list of all the things that they react to. So you can either have no weakness, no sensitivity, a mild, a moderate, or
That's Rosie. Let's hold on a second.
I'm so proud that mine are like being calm. And so I sent that off and did that test and got it back, and I almost fell on the floor because everything that I was feeding, almost except for goat milk, he was sensitive to. Literally everything that I was feeding him. So it was high quality food. It was high quality things, but he happened to have a sensitivity to it. So what was the game changer was once I got that back and then realized, okay, here we are. He can only have goat, and he can only have lamb, and he can have goat's milk, but he can't have anything from a cow. So I, you know, prior to that, I was doing fermented goat's milk, and I was doing kefir, and I was alternating. So I was just the poor guy. And so once I got that diet right and started feeding him things that he was not sensitive to, that in addition to his daily homeopathic remedy for my holistic vet, which he will be on for the rest of his life as well, and doing 6 leaky gut kits, just like I did with Roman. I did 6 back-to-back with him, 30 pounds on.
I know, that's great.
Like that. And now I feed him less food than I used to, and he gained 30 pounds, and he is beautiful. And he's doing so great. It's so thriving. And, you know, again, with him and with Roman, you know, the traditional thing for vets to say with all of this is, you know, the steroids and the prescription diets. And I am just so glad that I didn't do that, because they would not be thriving the way that they are now. And, you know, this is the payoff where they're at now. They're just, you know, we went through it, and now they're doing so well, and they're running around. I'm expecting these dogs to like live a long time.
There you go. Exactly. Think longevity. That's what we're
Yes,
about.
right.
That's my mission in life, is for all of us to have these dogs as healthy and as active and as thriving as we can for as long as possible. So you're doing
Yes, for
great
sure.
work. I appreciate that you are sharing this with us and how much you've gone through to learn this and figure it out for your dogs. So I take it you came across somebody recently that has the same diagnosis as Roman, right?
Yeah, I saw a rescue post where they think that that's what the dog has. And so I just want to make sure that, it's out there that, there's a different way to handle and address it, and you're going to get far better results. I mean,
Mhm.
I just really don't feel like that Roman, if I went that script food and steroid route, that he'd even be alive at this point. I don't think that he would, because he was just at that point when we did that surgical biopsy, he just sunk so low from from where he was whenever I got him, with all of the Tylenol powder and the Metro and all of that. I mean, it just, I don't think he would have. I wouldn't have seen him flourish. And he, his medicine is this great raw diet that he loves. I mean, it's like this fresh food. I guarantee you that once a dog realizes that raw food is food, if they've never had it before, they look at it like, what is this? But once they realize it, it's much more enjoyable for them to eat than the kibble. And what kills me, I think, the most about that's really trashing a raw diet is, the veterinary community is the only medical profession that you'll hear where people will say that a processed diet is supreme. Like, if our doctors told us that, like, if I was diagnosed with IBS and my doctor came to me and said, hey, okay, well, you just need to put you on some steroids and you should eat McDonald's every day. Like,
That's
what?
exactly what I was thinking. Right.
What?
Mhm.
No, but we listen to it
We
from
don't
our
do it
vets, and I don't want to bash vets because they have such a terrible job. And I know that people come in there, they get busy. A lot of pet parents aren't like you and I, who have a dog with an issue, and they sit down and research and find out everything they can, and research and ask people questions. Oh, you've dealt with this, what did you do? And most people don't want to do that, so they come to their vet and they're like, here's a problem, give me a pill, I'll give you some money, and I want to go about my life and go out to dinner and get my nails done. Right. So that's got to be a tough situation to be in as a veterinarian. And I don't blame them. Again, I love my GP vet. I do. But here's the thing, we have found ourselves in this system where the very little education that vets are getting in vet school is coming from the pet food manufacturers. How would that be again if McDonald's, or I don't mean to pick on McDonald's. I mean, I don't mean McDonald's. I don't mean to pick on, but any of the fast food, if they were the ones telling our doctors what we should be eating,
Right.
we would never stand for that. Why are we standing for it in the veterinary community?
I don't know.
I don't understand it. But I am just so thankful that now you're seeing more and more come out. Like, I love Dr. Judy Morgan, Dr. Karen Becker. She was the one that got me into feeding raw. I remember I found some videos that she did. It was like a 3-part series that I watched, and that's what got me into doing raw. Like, I follow Raw Pet Medics on Facebook, and they have a podcast that you can actually watch. And I love, there is this wealth of information, and of course there is this wealth of information that's out there now. If people will take the time and listen to it and see that there are other ways, I mean, I just feel like good change is coming.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that there is a lot more people interested in it. I know a lot of people struggle with the decision to go raw, or think that it's not budget friendly enough or whatever, but there are a lot of ways, right? I know you probably spend more than you would on kibble, but these prescriptions aren't
Certainly.
cheap. But you probably would have also been spending more on the vet appointments if you were lucky enough to still have him. As you said, eating those foods, you would still be at the vet's office.
Right, because it wouldn't be the same results as what I have now. It would be these constant flare-ups, constantly going back for some kind of metro or something, for some kind of medication. And then, you know, again, going back in those cycles of loss of sleep because he's up at night sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, is there any more you would like to add to this as we wrap up? I think this has been super helpful, and I can't wait to get it shared out with other dog mamas and people who are trying to figure all this stuff out.
No, I mean, you know, there's lots of different ways to do raw. I just, you know, and you can definitely do homemade raw much more affordably than you can commercial raw. Uh, you know, but just make sure if you're doing it, you know, that you're getting some information about how to do it correctly. And there's lots of free, you know, resources out there that you can do, that you can watch, and you can find some diets if you want to give it a shot. But
Well, there are a lot of people that do what I call winging it, and this is not always okay, right? I had somebody recently say they were feeding turkey and rice, and that was the dog's meal. I'm like, no, we can't do that, right? But they're trying to do the best they can. And I have people call me all the time and they're like, I feed raw. And I'm like, well, what does that mean to you? What exactly is in that bowl? Just because it's a piece of raw something doesn't mean that it's balanced. And I keep hearing what you said about the vet who wouldn't write the prescription for your diet, saying that wasn't balanced. And yet everything you rattled off in there, I'm like, all that sounds pretty great to me. Yes, it needs to be sort of the right ratios. And I'm sure that it was. That vet just didn't understand it from being outside of traditional feeding that they had been taught.
Yeah, it was actually that vet nutritionist that said that. But here's the thing, you know, and that's why these diets, like that Darwin's diet, is meant to be fed when you have a specific issue. It's not meant to be a long term, like for a healthy dog.
Neither are the prescription diets. If you go read the label or the fine print in the documentation, it says temporary diet while you figure out the root cause.
But here's the thing, at that point, it didn't matter because he wasn't going to absorb all of the nutrients in a properly balanced diet anyway, because his gut was trash. The point was to try to start healing his gut so he can start, you know, yeah. I mean, I understand, but here's the other thing too, that I think that people, you know, I don't want people to get too stressed out about feeding raw too, is that, you know, you and I, every meal that we eat is not balanced. And so like for Abner, because I was having, you know, I was trying to keep weight on him, I was having to feed him so much, you know, there for a while, I was like feeding him like 11 pounds of raw a week. Well, if you try to divide that out equally, you know, by day, that's some weird number. You got to get out scales and weigh and all of that. And I don't have time for that. I mean, I don't cook for myself, which is why I like commercial raw. They prepare it, you know, I don't, but so what I did was just, you know, some days he would have, you know, a pound in the morning and a pound in the evening. And the next day he would have half a pound in the morning and a half a pound in the evening. And as long as it netted out for that 7-day period is okay, then I was okay with it, right? Because that's how we feed ourselves.
That's right. And I do that with my dogs. I know some clients and some people that are in some of the groups that I'm in. They have got out a scale and they're measuring meal by meal by meal by meal. And I'm like, the madness of it all, right? How much time does that take? I'm like, I know how much my dogs need to eat on average. And I'm like you, it comes out of the refrigerator. And when that week's portion is gone, fine. But it may have been more in this meal and less in tomorrow. And that's okay. We don't have to get obsessive about it.
Right.
Your dog in the quote unquote proverbial wild is not going to eat pre-portioned food.
Right. It's very true. It's very true. So you kind of have, when people start off feeding raw, you kind of have those who really obsess about it. Yeah. And you have those who are just like, you know, throw a chicken wing in there and a couple of carrots. You know? Right. You know what I mean? You need to find kind of like that happy middle and thinking, you know, kind of the same concepts of how we feed ourselves.
That's right. So. Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate your time very much. And as
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Please reach out to learn more about natural wellness for your dog or to schedule a consultation at naturalwellnessfordogs.com. Click the follow button on this podcast so you never miss an episode. Thank you for listening to the Dana Brigman Canine Nutrition and Wellness Podcast. Have a great day.